One, Trump's badass entrance to the RNC as Joe Biden gives another fumbling, bumbling, would-be news cycle leading, possibly Democratic nominee canceling, conspiracy peddling interview with NBC. Two, who is J.D. Vance? And why was he picked as Donald Trump's running mate as vice president? With Josh Holmes of Ruthless. Three, what an Airhead show, says C. Krabby about the Will Cain Show. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand by hitting subscribe at Apple or Spotify. Checking your local stations from San Jose to the Catskills of the Will Cain Show. Live on terrestrial radio, market to market, coast to coast. Always hit subscribe on YouTube, and you can remember not just to hang out with the Will Cain Show every Monday through Thursday, live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, but to make sure you're there when we break down in a special episode the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, or when we sit down with The Rock live from Lincoln Financial Field, or we spend an hour and a half with Donald Trump. All of which is available to you by subscribing on YouTube to The Will Cain Show. We got two-a-days, we got Young Establishment James, we got Tinfoil Pat, and we got what some, like C. Krabby on YouTube, call an Airhead show. Coming up a little bit later today, we're going to break down your comments, get you involved as part of the community here, as part of the Willisha. But let us stick with what I think should remain story number one, and that is the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Story number one. Donald Trump made an entrance worthy of 50 Cent's Many Men. Many men have tried to kill me. Reports are, by the way, a little bit later this week at the Republican National Convention, we might see an appearance, perhaps a performance, by 50 Cent. Bandaged on his ear, Donald Trump came in not to Many Men on Monday, but he came into Lee Greenwood in what had to amount as one of the most badass entrances in political history. Watch.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today.
Just over 48 hours prior to that entrance, standing in front of thousands in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump took a .556 or .223 round through the ear. He was a millimeter from losing his life. And just over 2 days later, he makes an appearance in front of thousands, ear bandaged. You know, it's hard. But every once in a while, you have to take a step back and remember that Donald Trump's not a character in a melodrama. He's not on a reality television show. He's actually a human being. I think this gets increasingly hard for those on the left, but I think it even can be hard for those on the right because he becomes a symbol. He becomes a character, and he can become a caricature. But he's a man. And in that moment, I do think it's important to step back and think, what's going through the mind of that man? Of course, not to be literal in our metaphors, but he was a millimeter from something else going through his head. But on this night, he could be forgiven for not being wrought with thoughts of his own mortality. We talked about it when George W. Bush came out to throw the first pitch for the New York Yankees after 9/11 and threw a strike. In his own way, this is a little bit like that moment. He didn't throw a physical strike, but he threw a symbolic strike against those that would strike down Donald Trump. And you have to remember, as a man, as a human being, what might he be thinking? Donald Trump looked different. I think many people noticed that. There was something just different about his aura as he walked into the RNC. I don't know if it was in his eyes. I don't know if it was in his energy. It was a little more contemplative. Maybe maybe a little shook. And why wouldn't he be? 52 hours before, in front of thousands, his life was on the line. 52 hours later, he's there again, appearing in front of thousands. But see, strength and courage aren't the absence of fear. Strength and courage are what you do with fear. When I was living in New York City and I tried to get my boys, and, before you learn the lesson that parenting is more like being a gardener, when you still think parenting is like being a sculptor, you know what I mean by that? We don't shape our children. They are who they are, and our job as parents is to weed the garden and let them grow into what they will be. But when you're still in the mindset you can actually shape who they are, I got my boys into skateboarding. And the reason that I got my boys into skateboarding is that I wanted them to face fear. I always was impressed, and I wasn't some big skateboarder, but I was impressed with guys who could drop in 10 feet into a concrete bowl. And the reason I was impressed by that is mechanically, formatically, fear is actually the thing that hurts you. Like when you drop in, you have to fully commit. It's not that you don't have fear, it's that you overcome fear. And if you can overcome fear, you fully commit and skate right out of that vertical drop. But if you give in to fear, if you hesitate, if you lean back a little bit, that's when you slide out from underneath yourself. That's when you fail. That's when you break. That's when you can get hurt. Donald Trump did look different. Now, did he feel fear? It's almost beside the point, because it's what he would have done if he did feel fear. He overcame it. And that, my friends, is strength. Not the absence of fear, but overcoming it. I think what you're looking at is just too many in a short period of time. Iconic moments of leadership and strength. I truly do believe that. Now, there are others like hacks, and I just want to take a minute to talk about hacks. I think that the hacks, Warren Buffett had a famous saying about the stock market: you never know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. The tide's gone out on the left, and you can see who's been swimming naked, and it's Stark, who was and is a hack. And here's, the RNC crowd echoing Donald Trump's immediate aftermath of taking a bullet to the head, chanting, "Fight, fight, fight." Listen. Fight, 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 they yell at the RNC. Dean Obadiah, who I knew in some past life when I had more interaction with those that turns out to be insane on the left, tweeted, "Bone-chilling to see at the Republican National Convention, people chanting fight in unison with one arm punching in the air instantly conjures up rallies from the 1930s Germany. There is no other way to put it." 48 hours after their hyperbolic rhetoric in comparing Donald Trump to an existential threat, a threat to democracy, literal Hitler and a Nazi, they return to that insanity. And by the way, they're returning to all kinds of insanity. I am taken aback by what Two-A-Days, one of my producers, told me yesterday. He's been hearing over lefty brunches in Brooklyn that so many on the left have bought into this idea that it was staged, that Donald Trump, by the way, crushing Joe Biden in the polls, and Joe Biden in the middle of an implosion decides now's the time to pay a 20-year-old to take a 223 to my ear, to zero in on my ear. That's the idea. But so many lefties, and I've seen videos, not all of the left, much of the left. I've seen videos of people that walk amongst us. Like, it looks like your father-in-law. It looks like your friend's dad, worried about sunscreen with big hats on, walking in L.A., certain that Donald Trump's a fraud and this was staged. It's crazy how much this is taking off. It is insane how they've lost their minds. And by the way, last night at the RNC, there's a video circulating social media where Donald Trump closes his eyes. I think you can see a picture of this. Donald Trump closing his eyes at the RNC, and that's been peddled around as he can't even stay awake. This is in league with, this is akin to CNN. Donald Trump falls down on stage. They're trying to create a moral equivalency. It's a backdoor excuse for Joe Biden's frailty. This is a backdoor reverse engineer piece of propaganda because everyone points out how Joe Biden is frail and senile and falls asleep to say, see, Donald Trump, old and can't stay awake. What they neglect to say is it was during the prayer and everyone in the crowd's eyes were closed for the prayer. They're losing their minds. And why wouldn't they be? Because they have been peddled this. I want to play this for you. It's a little bit longer clip. But they have been peddled this for a decade.
Trying to figure out how did people get basically drawn in by Hitler? How did that happen?
He talks about the blood of America as being poisoned, echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
And we hear this all the time. People say, gosh, if back in the day, if only one person had the courage to stop Hitler.
I think one thing you and I agree on is Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country.
What, in your view, would happen if he were to be reelected?
Oh, I can't even think that, because I think it would be the end of our country as we know it. You could see it in
Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, media members, literal Hitler, the end of our democracy. Why wouldn't that breed a crazy? Not just the crazies that sit on The View, who today look at an assassination attempt on Donald Trump and say, you know what the real problem here is? It's guns. Oh, and white men. Watch.
What was this again? It was, a 20-year-old lone wolf, white, whack job with easy access to a gun. And we have to have a conversation about that, because it wasn't a drag queen. It wasn't an immigrant. It wasn't a pissed off liberal woman. This keeps happening. And we need to react, not as left or right, not as Republicans or Democrats. We need to react as Americans.
All right.
And we need to ask better.
Okay, I just want to add that the shooter, yes, he was a 20-year-old kitchen worker from nearby Bethel Park in Pennsylvania. According to a CNN report, a senior law enforcement official said that he bought 50 rounds of ammunition from a local gun store hours before the rally. Shouldn't that have been reported? Somebody buys a 20-year-old white guy? I mean, we've seen that many times now, young white men with guns.
White men. So now race is prevalent. Now race is important. Now race should be used in policy and law and reporting, not just in affirmative action, but in gun sales. Their open racism is repulsive. But Will, it's the dummies on The View. Will, it's internet commenters. It's not real. And Will, everybody, the right's not exempt from, violent imagery and rhetoric. And you know what I would say today? No, you're right. The right's not exempt. They're not. You know what? People shouldn't be indulging in jokes and laughing about the attack on Paul Pelosi. They shouldn't. They shouldn't show hammers and underwear. Shouldn't. Congressmen shouldn't be putting out animated videos of AOC being killed. They shouldn't. But I want to be clear about something. It's not an equivalency. It's not. This heightened rhetoric, it's not the same. This has become a central tenet in the minds and the hobgoblins of the minds on the left because it's a central tenet of the theme of the Democratic Party. And it was reiterated for us again within 48 hours of the attempt on Donald Trump's life as Joe Biden sat down with Lester Holt of NBC.
You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was there's very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
It's a week ago, this would have led the news cycle and might have put a nail in the coffin of Joe Biden's campaign. It would have been leading the leading piece of evidence among Democrats of replacing Joe Biden. The interview was embarrassing. He couldn't complete sentences. He couldn't complete thoughts. He mumbled words. He blended them together. And he replaced crosshairs with bullseye. A week ago, this would be your top story. But because of an assassination attempt, the pick of J.D. Vance as vice president, lawfare's collapse, this is a tree falling in the forest. But it's also a lie. It's conspiracies. He went on to say that Donald Trump called Nazis very fine people. He went on to repeat the bloodbath hoax. He went on to repeat the lie that Donald Trump wants to be a dictator. This is what happens. This is how you create the mindset and the culture of an assassin. We'll get into a little bit later the latest on the failures of the Secret Service here in the Will Cain Show. But who is J.D. Vance? And why is he Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate? Let's get into it in just a moment with one of the hosts of the Ruthless Podcast, live from the RNC, Josh Holmes, coming up on the Will Cain Show.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Cain, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters, and Fox News contributors. Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Streaming now on Fox Nation.
This is insane.
This summer, join Abby Hornacek.
The biodiversity in this national park is world-renowned.
Get parked.
Get to just sit and take this all in.
For a new season.
There is no way this is real.
This is Parked.
Don't miss Parked with Abby Hornacek. Streaming now, only on Fox Nation. Sign up at foxnation.com.
From the Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Who is J.D. Vance, and why was he picked as the running mate, as vice president to would-be president Donald Trump? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. If you're watching on YouTube, just drop into the text link underneath this live stream and hit subscribe to the Will Cain Show, or head over to Apple or Spotify if you're listening, and you can always catch the latest episode of the Will Cain Show. Another show that I am certain you would enjoy and who have become friends of us here is the Ruthless Podcast. And so we're excited now to be joined live from the Republican National Convention by Josh Holmes, one of the co-hosts of the Ruthless Podcast, and I would say inappropriately dressed up in a suit and tie here for the Will Cain Show. What's up, Josh?
I'm sorry about that. Well, I mean, geez, it's a convention. I got to kind of spiff up a little bit. I feel like I'm a little overdressed, but we'll go with it.
I don't have my Ruthless hat. I got sent a Ruthless hat in the mail, which I thank you for, and I would have broken that out just to classy the joint up here. You're looking very Trumpian with your silk tie and your cufflinks and French cuffs. Just very snazzy there. But we're glad to have you from the RNC.
I'm trying to act the part
first of all,
like a real adult.
Well, somebody should act the part. I mean, we were a little disappointed that when it came to the Ruthless, you're who we got. I mean, we were really jazzed that we might get Michael Clark Duncan from the Green Mile on the Will Cain Show. Let's let's put this up on this is Fox and Friends promotion, I believe, of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade. It's a graphic of who the guests are. It's Senator Tom Cotton and Tomi Lahren. It is Josh Holmes of the Ruthless Podcast, and then your co-host, Michael Clark Duncan, and a photo of your I did not know, man, that your co-host is the dude that said boss in the Green Mile.
He's an Academy Award nominee, Will. He's been he passed away 12 years ago. He's from the grave, but we have him twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, evidently, on the Ruthless Friday program.
Oh, that was awesome, man, when you guys put that out. One of Josh's co-hosts' name is Michael Duncan, and somehow somebody at Fox and Friends must have Googled Michael Duncan and came up with the picture of the actor. You can picture him, remember? from the Green Mile. Was he in anything but the Green Mile? Do we have another movie that we can say about Michael Clark Duncan besides the Green Mile?
I don't know. I feel like in that era, he kind of played the same character in about 35 different films. All I know is we're happy to have him in the office on a day-to-day basis. We're happy to talk to him. It is actually super funny. Ever since Fox and Friends put that promo out, every time I walk by his office, he says, "Hey, boss, I'm dead tired." We've had a ton of fun with it.
All right, Josh Holmes of Ruthless here with us on the Will Cain Show. So, Josh, what do you think, first of all, about the selection of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's running mate?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great selection for a couple of reasons. One, he's a good guy. I've known him for several years. He is exactly the kind of person that he comes off of on TV. He's a family guy. He's a salty-of-the-earth guy. If you haven't read Hillbilly Elegy, if there's anybody left who hasn't read it, you should read it. I think it basically changed the way that the American culture sort of looks at Appalachian families in a lot of different ways. It shed important insight into an overlooked population that, frankly, this country and the media narratives have not had any interest in covering up till the point where he sort of illuminated that for all of us. But I think more importantly, just from a political perspective, if you look at where Joe Biden himself, where their campaign has said that they absolutely must win in order to get to 270 and be reelected as President of the United States, it's those Rust Belt, that blue wall states. We're talking Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I don't know anyone, not anyone in the Senate, not anyone in the House, I don't know anyone on the national scene that speaks more authentically to folks in that region than J.D. Vance does. It's his life. It's where he grew up. Those are his people. And I think that this ticket is going to be an awful big boost from having somebody like that.
All right, I want to explore that. Let's just stick for a moment on the electoral effects of Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. So right now, I believe betting markets like Polymarket have, shockingly, by the way, it's 75%. I think Donald Trump's up to 75%. Joe Biden's down to 25%. Okay, starting from that premise, right? The Economist says, all right, if Joe Biden loses Michigan, his prospects drop from 25 to 3. He cannot lose Michigan. He drops to 3. If he loses Wisconsin, it drops to 6 in 100, right? 6%. If he loses Pennsylvania, 7 in 100. So he needs these states, all right? So the idea here that you're suggesting is that J.D. Vance helps in the Rust Belt, helps with those states. And I get it. I think, and I want to get into J.D. Vance in a minute, that he is a true believer. I do. And I want to talk about that in a second. But just electorally, I don't know, man. I really am thinking this through, Josh. Like, J.D. did come from where he came from. There's no doubt. That's authentic. But he went on to what? Yale? He's very Ivy League educated. Hillbilly Elegy, let's be real. Like you said, if anybody hasn't read it, the people that have read Hillbilly Elegy are people into politics. And like your average America First Rust Belt voter, they haven't read Hillbilly Elegy. Like, it's just not, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. And so I do wonder, I think JD is super smart. I don't know that he has the charisma. He certainly doesn't have Donald Trump's charisma. So I just wonder about the play here. Does he actually win you Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan?
Well, I think it's that authenticity that you have to look for. Look, we boil these things down so far in a presidential election. You get to know these candidates absolutely inside and out, and you either like what you see or you don't. But with J.D. Vance, you're going to get what you're going to get. I think the one thing that turns off voters more than anything else, is somebody who's pretending to be something they're not. And that's not what J.D. is. He's the real McCoy. I also think when you look at this electorally, if we're being honest, Donald Trump blots out the sun, Will. This is a candidate unlike any other in American politics in that you're not going to cast a ballot. You're not going to be sitting on the fence like, I don't know what I think about Donald Trump, but I like J.D. Vance. That voter does not exist, let's be clear. I think where he has a distinct advantage is as we go along, you get a post-Labor Day discussion, say the economy snaps back into focus. Hard to imagine after the events of the last 3 weeks that we're actually talking about some policy that affects the American people, but that's where we will be after Labor Day. And when we do that, you're going to hear from somebody who's the best surrogate for Donald Trump as his vice presidential nominee who knows what he's talking about and actually can speak to some of the pains that the American people are having in rural communities across this country.
So what I was doing there, so first of all, I like J.D. Vance. I like the pick, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. We're going to have a discussion, but I just try to be real about, like, not everything is 100-0, right? I'm not, like, he's not a pick that's like, it hits every single, it hits every single, you check every box, man. I'm just a little unconvinced on the electoral wins he puts behind the sales. And what I like about it, I'm going to tell you what I like the most, Josh, is, and I think this didn't play to Donald Trump at all. This is my suspicion. The reports are that Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump Jr. were part of the big lobbying group for J.D. Vance. And there were others pushing for other names. Rubio and Burgum were apparently out at an earlier stage, so whoever was advocating for them, that fell by the wayside. It looked like it came down to Glenn Youngkin. I think this is what reporting suggests, Glenn Youngkin versus J.D. Vance. What I really like about Vance is two things. I do believe he is a true believer, and he's an intellectual about it, and he can prosecute that case. But let's start with this. I also like that he creates legacy, Josh. I don't think that mattered to Donald Trump. I actually don't think he thinks about legacy beyond himself too much. But I think this is a move, this is a move that makes sort of this repositioning of America First ideology something that can have runway into the future beyond Donald Trump. And that's a legacy.
Yeah, no, look, I think you're right. I mean, clearly, J.D., of all of the candidates that were discussed is on the short list of Donald Trump, is the one that ideologically fits the best with the America First vision as Donald Trump is laid out. He's somebody that doesn't need to be convinced, and he certainly doesn't have to put an inauthentic pitch out for America's place in the world and how you would run a domestic economy. I mean, he's already on board with all of that. I think the question beyond that is, do Trump voters really want somebody else? Like, I guess we'll find out 4 years from now or 8 years from now. I mean, I think where we're at currently is people are all about Donald Trump. I mean, it is. I'm at this convention, Will. I was here in 2016. People were very excited about Donald Trump in 2016, but not like it is now. I mean, this is a uniform deal. You can walk around from all sets, ideological sets within the party. Everybody's on board. This is a very, very different convention. So I think this is more about Donald Trump than anything else.
That's really interesting what you said. So while I say it sets up for a legacy and a continuation of America First, and I do believe I'm correct on that, it doesn't necessarily mean that I think all of a sudden J.D. Vance is your leading candidate in 2028. I don't. So, and it sounds like you're the same. Like, if you started right now and you put, now it's not fair to say right now because J.D. Vance is going to have 4 years in this, you know, whatever we're going to call this, in the spotlight or in the shade underneath the spotlight that is Donald Trump. And that's either going to elevate him or it could not elevate him. It didn't Mike Pence, right? So wherever we are today isn't where J.D. Vance will be in 4 years. But right now, as far as, I don't know that I would say J.D.'s going to be on a stage with Youngkin. I don't know who else is going to run. And I don't know that he's the presumptive favorite just because of what's happened now.
Yeah, well, look, I think, Will, I haven't been doing this forever, but I've been doing this for 20 years, which feels like 100 lifetimes in politics. And what I've watched within the Republican Party, it's a little different within Democrats, who are sort of monolithic, and they follow each other wherever they go. And, I mean, it's a helpless party in many, many ways, but that's a story for another day. With Republicans, over time, we have chosen leaders that fit the moment. They may not be next in line. They may not have the best credentials. They may not be what everybody thinks should happen the next presidential election or the one after that. But we have leaders that fit a very specific moment in time. I think Donald Trump has done that. I think he's done that in 2024 way better than even in 2020 or 2016. He's a leader that meets the moment, not just for the Republican Party, but for the country. And we're going to see where we're at in 2028. God willing, we're in a place where Donald Trump can get this country back on track economically and get us to a place where we're respected in the world again. And then in 2028, you know, if you have the luxury of not worrying about the existential threats to America, perhaps your mind can wander about what other kind of leadership that you want at that time. But we're going to have a different set of plug-ins at that point.
Right.
I agree with you that J.D. is definitely going to inherit much of the America First just by virtue of where he is. But we'll see where the country is in 4 or 8 years.
By the way, Josh, where are you right now at the RNC? You're in Radio Row? Like, this is where Kilmeade is doing his show? Where are you?
Yeah,
I wouldn't know because all I see is a gigantic white background. Yeah, well,
I'm in your Fox
fellas,
studio. It's a
I mean,
beautiful
whoever's behind the
location.
camera, fellas, whoever's behind the camera, I love you guys. I probably know you. What is this? I don't know if it's a beautiful location or not. I mean, all I see is a gigantic white Fox logo, and I can hear some ambient noise that gives me the sense that Josh is somewhere interesting. Like, let's get a zoom out. Where are you there, Josh?
Joke. Yeah, the two here is no joke. I mean, that is a large 2, and I'm blocking out the 4. Democracy, clearly. Democracy on the line, as we well know, as Joe Biden talks about. So we
got to save that. I'm so glad we're framing it up.
I love it.
We're glad to have you in a flash cam in the basement of the convention center at the RNC with a lockdown shot of a white background. Thanks for joining us, Josh. Good Lord.
You're the man, Will.
What are you doing here?
You're the man.
I'm sitting here in a freaking closet in Dallas, Texas.
Well, next time you're in D.C. or New York or somewhere, paths are going to have to cross, and we'll have a beer and catch up about all of this.
Yeah, as long as you take off that lavender tie, I'll go out with you somewhere appropriate.
I mean, come on.
Joshua.
Is this really a problem for you, Will? Good God. I thought this was a tasteful selection for the Will Cain Show.
It is is it a Trump tie? Is that a Trump tie?
I wish it was a Trump tie. No, it's not a Trump tie. That would be something, though. They still have those? If they have those, I'll look into it.
You also went with the dimple. I'm a big dimple in the tie guy. Hegseth doesn't like the dimple.
I'm a dimple
he likes
guy.
Me too. Hegseth likes a fold, like a fold. It's I don't know.
No,
he also likes.
You can't have a fold. You got to go with the dimple. This is a more sophisticated look, Will. You were right on the money there, and I don't think anybody else knows what they're talking about.
Josh Holmes from the Ruthless Podcast here with us on the Will Cain Show. All right, I want to go back to J.D. for a moment because I told you there's 2 things I like, the legacy angle, and I do believe that he's a true believer, Josh. And so this is what I mean, and I'm going to be real about this. I think there are a couple of different people in the pro-Trump camp, okay? I'm gonna break it down into 3 categories, and I'm being 100% real. Category 1. Love Donald Trump to the point of zealotry. He could never do any wrong. He's never done any wrong, and they will reverse rationalize anything into a good thing for Donald Trump. Okay? I know a lot of people in this camp. It's not the camp that I'm in. I don't think that's the camp J.D. Vance is in. Then there's the fakers. I think there are a lot of fakers. And the reason I bring this up is there was a line in the Axios article about what became important to Trump is to not pick somebody who was faking their love for Trump. And I do think a lot of the people that were in the running to even be his vice president should be suspected of faking their love for Trump. And I think, by the way, Josh, there's 2 categories of fakers. There's the establishment fakers. Okay, I don't believe that all of the... Maybe your old boss doesn't even fake loving him, so there's some others.
No, he's pretty.
Josh used to work for Mitch McConnell. I'm going to be real. I don't think Marco Rubio actually loves Trump. And I think that would have been a really suspect choice, okay? And there's another category of fakers. There's people that do what we do on the media side who know that they should be pro-Trump because it's the path to fame. And I think there's a lot of those people who don't actually love Trump or his policies. To be real, I think there are grifters. And I hate that word because it's used as a cudgel. But I do think there are some people that are like, this is the side to be on if I want to be popular. Okay? And then there's a third category,
You're 100% right.
Josh, and that is the people who have arrived at Trump through intellectualization, who don't think he is the next coming of the Messiah, who see his pros and his cons, his flaws and his assets, and maybe even in my case have come to understand his flaws in a lot of ways are his assets, and that he is genuinely good for a positive direction of America. I think that's the camp J.D. Vance is in, and it's one of my favorite things about Vance.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's a really good breakdown. And I totally agree with all those categories, by the way. I mean, look, we've sort of been along for this journey ourselves on Ruthless in that there was a lot that we liked about 4 years of Donald Trump, and we had a lot of questions after 2022 about whether or not it was the right time for Donald Trump in 24. And so we spent the better part of a year and a half interviewing all of the prospective primary candidates that he ran against and watched them make the arguments. And we were sort of conflicted ourselves about whether or not this was the right time for Donald Trump. Now, that was not the case for 70% of the Republican electorate. They've already sold. They wanted Donald Trump back. Ultimately, that is what it is. But I think what you've seen over the last 3 weeks, starting with that debate against Joe Biden, where he just could kind of clearly lay out himself authentically, contrast that with a guy who has no business anywhere near the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, and then watch his response immediately to the attempted assassination on him. That's the kind of leadership that I don't even know that America we knew that we needed at this moment. I mean, I grew up, in the Reagan era. I was, did you, Will? And I think we were sort of taken for granted the fact that everything, we were always on the same, it was always Team America, right? And we always had optimism and hope for a future for our kids and grandkids like the ones that we inherited. And that slipped away to the point where you didn't really know how bad it was until you saw Donald Trump get up from that stage, raise his fist, and it was like, hell yes. Hell yes. I mean, this is the kind of guy who, God forbid you have something happen to you overseas, he's going to send the Marines and go get you out of there, right? We have lost that. We don't even talk about that any longer. That is the slipping of America that right now, at this very moment, he totally embodies. And so that in that last category, and I think J.D. has got a huge part of that, no question. But there's an awful lot of us who have, tried on different shoes and see what fits, and ultimately have come to the conclusion that at this moment in time, in July of 2024 and in November of 2024, Donald Trump is absolutely what this country needs.
You know what I would love to do? So what they're going to use, Josh, to your point, is J.D. was a self-described never Trump, and he said some really, really bad things about Trump that I'd never I never went that far, like in questioning Donald Trump. But I don't care. Like, I actually really genuinely believe his conversion. You know what I'd love to do, Josh? You guys should do it on Ruthless. We should maybe do this together and get some more people. I would like to do a show, the moment of my conversion, or when I converted, whatever, when you came around Trump. Because here's the truth, and I don't think he'd mind. One of the biggest supporters of Trump that I know is probably my buddy Pete Hegseth, right? But that doesn't mean he always was, and he'll talk to you about it.
Right.
And so it's kind of fascinating, and that's kind of fascinating to know and to analyze when people began. Because right now, Josh, we're seeing a conversion even among Bill Ackman and Elon Musk, although and this is what it was for me, it was a slow conversion. It wasn't like an epiphany moment. It was a period of time. And mine's several years in the past. Mine was probably, if I had to guess, mine's somewhere between 18 and 20 is my conversion. And I think it's happening now for Musk and Ackman and Sachs and that crowd. And I do believe it's genuine. I think it's a genuine conversion. I would think it'd be fascinating to kind of catalog. And there's some people who were in right away. I'm not denying those people. And there's some people whose conversion was in 15, 16, whatever. But I'd kind of like to catalog what did it for people, the moment of your conversion.
Yeah, it's going to be very different things, right? And again, part of this is the onslaught of media and how you consume your news and what they tried to do to Donald Trump, both in his campaign and his first 4 years of being president. If you were not a skeptical consumer of New York Times, Washington Post, AP, all of the broadcast channels, if you were not skeptical about the way that they covered things, you probably believe this guy was the worst person on the face of the planet, right? But somewhere along the way, and this is the beauty of a diverse media culture, and that you can get information from a whole bunch of different sources these days, you can begin to see some other things. I find it so fascinating. How about all the liberals who are like, my God, did you know that Joe Biden's senile? Holy smokes, I never even imagined that. And you're like, what the hell were you watching? Are you kidding me? All you had to do was pop on the TV at some point over the last 4 years, and it became apparent to you. But they live in a echo chamber that exclusively talks about all of the virtues of Joe Biden. There is a echo chamber that you could get misimpressions about everything and everybody in politics, but more particularly Donald Trump. So, it's tough. You have to – those moments that I think maybe did things for individuals are something you're going to have to find outside of the lens of the mainstream media in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I think in a way, Amber Rose, which I don't even know what Amber Rose's claim to fame is. It's like somewhere in the rap culture.
She was great, though.
I get. Yeah, but that's what her speech was about. Like, there are those on the right who are like, "Oh, how dare you have a self-professed slut or whatever? Come talk." Yeah. And but her talk was about her conversion, and that's what's kind of fascinating. It was like when she broke out of. I really think it is a bit of a mass psychosis that's perpetuated by the mainstream media of a certain vision of Donald Trump, shallow vision, and how all of a sudden she's like, boom, oh, that's not reality. Yeah. All of a sudden she told her story of breaking out of that mass psychosis.
Yeah, I think that's important. And look, this is happening with demographics across the country right now. And it's not really just specific to Donald Trump as it is sort of conservative governance and the way that you approach how you represent people. And I think, look, Democrats have held on to old dogma, old constituencies just by generational passing them down. And we vote Democrat in this household. And you've seen communities, particularly multi-generational Hispanic communities, for example, all of a sudden have a very big shift. It's like, wait a minute, they don't even represent anything that reflects my values at all, and I'm just supposed to go sort of vote Democrat over and over again. Donald Trump's been very good because he doesn't hold on to all of the stigma about what groups you can talk to and what groups you can't. He doesn't care. He'll go talk to anybody. And so for a lot of these people, it's the first time they're hearing it. You heard it from that young woman last night. I got to imagine that there are people across this country you never even would imagine would check a box for a Republican candidate anywhere who are not only considering it, but will do that in November.
Oh, absolutely. Of every race, of every generation. All right, just a couple more questions with Josh Holmes here from Ruthless. Since you're way more plugged into D.C. than I am, Josh, and in particular, because you worked in the senatorial office, I'm curious what you know about the view of J.D. Vance among the rest of the Senate. I get the sense that he's a little bit of the fly in the ointment, that he may not be the most popular among these. And these are feathers in the cap. There are those who've said, all the best people hate him. So, but what is his what is his reputation? What is his reputation in the Senate?
Look, I think it's complicated because he's new, right? I mean, he hasn't been there a long time. Nobody hates J.D. Vance. Right? I mean, there are people who go in of both conferences who just don't have an ability to get along with one another, regardless of what they believe or don't believe. You ultimately have to figure out a way to work with people in order to get anything you want done. JD's done that. He's done it actually in a bipartisan way, and sometimes he's done things that conservatives are like, wait a minute, what? This is like way left of center, the things that he's entertaining here. But he's not bound by this sort of rigid ideology. He's been trying to figure out exactly where he can make a difference, and that comes with working with a whole bunch of different people. Now, I'll also say, Will, the Senate is different in that there is a generational divide at this point. You mentioned my old boss and several others in his generation who are sort of on their way out. You've got a whole crop of younger senators. I mean, people who are like my peers, which, by the way, is a very hard thing for me to swallow, being a staffer all those years and then seeing guys younger than I am now being nominee for vice president of the United States. But he sort of runs in a crowd of younger conservatives, of people who look at the world a little bit differently and aren't afraid to express it, and certainly aren't afraid if they ruffle a couple of feathers as they do express it. And I think that's great. But there isn't anybody, Will, anywhere in the Senate who is like, man, I really hate that guy. Because those people exist. I don't need to name names, but they definitely exist. But that's not J.D. He's been somebody who...
You mean there are senators that the other senators hate? You're saying those exist.
No, there's a number of them. Yeah, they definitely exist.
Who? Come on, Josh.
And J.D.'s not one of them. What? You want me to name names? Well, you want me to, this is the Republican convention. We're supposed to be uniting here. We're supposed to be uniting here. I'll tell you over a beer sometime. I got a short list of them.
I can guess.
Here's the most important part. You definitely can guess. Here's the most important part. He's going to come up like a man and tell you that he disagrees with what you're trying to do, and he's going to explain why he disagrees with you and tell you he's going to work against it. That is what a gentleman or a gentlelady does in adult life, whether you're in politics, business, or anything else. That's what he's done since he's been in the Senate, and I think it's going to serve him really well when he's got a big role in a new administration.
All right. And we'll see how he does against Kamala Harris in a debate. The left seems cocky about that, by the way.
I can't wait for that.
I don't know why.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
That'll be
I
good.
mean, I hope we get a full Selena Meyer out of her, though. You know what I mean? The whole Veep or Veep thing. We're going to play that on our show today, by the way. Veep or Veep, where we have a quote from Kamala and a quote from Selena Meyer from the show Veep, and you have to pick which one is which. It's impossible.
That's amazing. That's great. That's why you need to subscribe to the Ruthless Podcast, by the way. They've got a beautiful setup from the RNC. They're outdoors. I mean, I don't know who's funding or sponsoring that show, but I got to get a hold of them. But it's a great setup outside the convention center. But you should check it out. Go subscribe to the Ruthless Podcast. Quality people. All right, man. Josh Holmes of the Ruthless Podcast.
Thanks,
awesome
Will.
to have you on today from the RNC. Yeah, man. Have fun.
You're the man. We'll do it anytime.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. I mean it. You should check it out, the Ruthless Podcast. They're on Instagram, X, Apple, Spotify, everywhere. So there's fascinating reporting today about the head of the Secret Service, the director of the Secret Service, saying that they didn't put somebody on the roof where shots were taken at Donald Trump because it was sloped. It would be a safety risk for the Secret Service. That's next on the Will Cain Show.
I'm Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my podcast, Perino on Politics. Every Monday, I'm going to talk to people I trust in politics as they tell me what they're seeing and thinking in the 2024 election cycle. This week on Perino on Politics, I'm joined by former senior advisor to President George W. Bush and now Fox News political contributor Karl Rove from the 2024 Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Available now on Apple, Spotify, and FoxNewsPodcast.com.
Friday on Fox Nation.
What you're about to see is incredible.
The sensational hit show bursts back into action.
Drop the gun!
Don't miss all new episodes of Crime Cam 24/7. New cameras.
You have eyes on him with the drone.
Exposing new crimes. And delivering swift justice. Crime Cam 24/7. New episode Friday on Fox Nation. Sign up now at foxnation.com.
America is streaming.
I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics.
Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom, returns to Fox News Audio with a brand new podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will be thrilled by the return of a familiar voice, but with a fresh spin as Dana guides audiences through the 2024 election cycle. Make sure you subscribe to this series wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
DEI has cost us the security, potentially the life of a former president. DEI, by placing representation above merit, has cost us security on our streets, our lives, our jobs, our economy, our foreign policy, and almost Donald Trump. That's coming up in just a moment here on The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio all across the country. Hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify, to listen, YouTube to watch. If you're watching, you may come away with the same impression as Gustavo is Ron. Hands down, but good show. Welcome to the Willisha, Gustavo. It's true. I'm like Ron Burgundy in Talladega Nights. I don't know what to do with my hands. I think it's my desk. I don't know. This is where I put my elbows, and then it puts my hands up here, and I talk with my hands, and it's a real thing, okay? And you're in my head, okay? Not just you, Gustavo. All of you. You're hanging around. You're in my grill. Do you guys think two-a-days, Young Establishment James, Tim Foyle, Pat, do you think Donald Trump was in his head last night? Did you see something different? Or am I wasn't the only one, because it was all over social media.
100%.
What do you think it was?
James said that earlier.
I mean, we know what it was. We know what it was, but what was it? Was it his eyes? Was it his energy? What was it?
I think it was kind of his facial features, too. You could just kind of see the way he looked at things.
I think it was his energy, too. His energy was a little
It was
different.
that he did a smile where it was kind of more of a...
Forced a little bit, maybe?
Yeah. Very introspective.
Yeah, you're right, James.
Like the
you're right, James.
kind of came up a little
facial
more.
Features.
Here. I think he was grateful to be there and realizing. I mean, he said it 100 times since then. He's not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I think that was also Lee Greenwood's first time playing, explicitly endorsing a candidate. He's always said that song is for both parties and for every American. And this time he was forcefully endorsed a candidate for president of the United States.
Well, we almost didn't have Donald Trump. Of course, he took a shot across the ear from a stage in Butler County, Pennsylvania. New reporting shows that the Secret Service considered that building a vulnerability. The Secret Service staged someone inside the building, but not on the roof. According to ABC News, Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle considered it a security risk. Why? Because it's a sloped roof. The quote is, that building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof, she told ABC News in an interview on Tuesday. Quote, and so, the decision was made to secure the building from the inside. So Secret Service, whose job is to protect the President of the United States, declined to do so because it could put the life or security of an officer of the Secret Service. Their job is literally to stand in front of bullets, but not stand on a sloped roof. Your job is literally to take a bullet, but not slip and slide on a roof. This is what you get. This is a product of DEI. This is what this is. All right, concerned DUI, always say DEI. DEI, at its very core, is an ideology of placing representation above merit. This is a lady who said 30% of the Secret Service should be female. That ideology is ingrained now. It's baked in to the United States Secret Service, as it is every government entity and almost every corporation in America, placing representation above merit. As a result, incompetent people run everything, and incompetent people make incompetent decisions. And as a final straw, nobody ever gets fired. Nobody was fired for the debacle in Afghanistan. Nobody is ever held accountable. This whole idea, this whole ideology, this whole representation above merit clearly has cost us so many things. Maybe it almost costed the life of Donald Trump. It is certainly, as it's affected law enforcement and prosecutors across the country, affected the safety of our streets and literally our lives. In corporate America, it's affected our jobs, our HR departments. At the highest levels of government, it has cost us the security of our economy. It has cost us our national security. This is an insidious, cancerous ideology that is inherently anti-American. America, let the best man win. America, risk takers push west. America, meritocracy. This ideology undermines everything, and it's represented right here in what happened with the United States Secret Service. GeoGotch on YouTube. Name one political opponent, not talk about stuff about another. What is this? I don't understand this, 2 days. You sent me this comment. What is this?
Well, there was the one after that because they were saying J.D. Vance was talking trash about Trump back in the day. So they're saying name one politician that hasn't done that before about another politician.
Yeah, I don't.
You know what I
okay, fine. But I still think J.D. Vance's opinions on Donald Trump will be brought up.
Yep.
I don't think, by the way, I don't think they're cheap shots. If the left brings it up, I think it's worthy. You should have to say, what happened, J.D.? Why did you change your tune? If somebody said that to me, I wouldn't begrudge the question. Will, you were on ESPN in 2016 or 17, saying you weren't pro Donald Trump. What happened? Fair question. Let's talk about it, and I'll explain. So I think that JD's past positions are fair game, and I have no doubt, by the way, that he'll be able to articulate his conversion. You like the idea of my show idea with Josh Holmes? Explain your conversion? That's a good show idea, right?
That's good. Yeah. Love that one.
Missy on YouTube says, I'm not crazy about JD. Brent on YouTube says, Vance is better than Vivek. And then Karen Schaefer says, he admitted talking crap to DJT. Is that about Vance?
Yes.
That he admitted? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he has. What do you got, Two-A-Days?
Speaking of talking crap, someone on our YouTube said something like this, like you mentioned earlier in the show.
What an airhead show from Sea Krabby.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, here's what I would say. I'd say two things. Guilty? Guilty? I guess.
I mean, I like Airheads the candy. Is that what he means?
I mean, I don't know when that person tuned in when we were debating the top 5 flags or bottom 5 flags in America, when we were debating Ron DeSantis' lifts in his boots, which he had. And I stand. By the way, there's Ron DeSantis people still mad. They still jump in. And I'm here to tell you, I like Ron DeSantis. And he still had some lifts in his boots. Who knows why that person calls his show an airhead? Here's what show. We do have fun.
Yeah.
We do veer off script. And also, I think if you're using the word airhead, you're probably 65.
Good point.
Do you think anybody, airhead, and there's nothing wrong with you being 65. We welcome you into our Big Ten. But nobody says airhead. Nobody says airhead anymore. Am I right?
No, it's like saying bonehead.
I did back in the day.
Yeah.
I think bonehead has survived the test of time more than airhead.
A little bit.
I think the candy probably ruined it.
James, you're like 19 years old. Do you and your friends use the word airhead?
No, if we're using a word for a lower IQ individual, we probably use things you wouldn't use on air.
I don't even know what to make of that. I don't know. Yeah.
Thousands of words, thousands of different words, but they're
Does
not
anyone
polite.
else feel like every time James talks, every time you talk, James, I feel like the goal of whatever you're saying isn't so much what you're saying, but that you have the impression you're a badass at the end of what you're saying. So what you just said was designed to make me think you and your friends are up there with some really not safe for TV words.
No, not at all. I was like, the only words I could think of are words I can't say. So that there's nothing more to it.
Yeah, it's like he's in the group chat with his buddies. We did have someone say
such an airhead.
We did have someone say this. I don't know whose mom this is from the show, but it was very nice to say that to say this.
Will's staff. It's Ann Breitrick.
Love Will's staff.
What up, Ann?
116. Yeah, they did the plural Willses off my middle name, Williams. Will's staff. So big fan of you three there.
Yeah. My fiance loved the Wills thing. She just keeps calling you Wills now, and that's your name to her from now on.
Really?
Yeah. She thought it was hilarious.
Well, so it was unanimous.
Yeah.
It was unanimous. Everybody loves you guys on air?
I think so.
Yeah, that's it.
Not this one.
Really?
Definitely not this one.
Barry. Barry Neal, 1814. Your staff sucks.
Get a job.
Thanks, Barry.
Get a job, Barry.
Whatever, Barry.
People are saying, guys.
People are
All
saying.
I'm saying is people are saying.
Many people are saying.
Ryan Gideon jumps into the comments, says, Will, miss you on ESPN, man. Love what you're doing now, though. Go Eagles. Oh, he's an Eagles fan. Well, I mean, it's all right. That's cool. It's Big Ten. Like I said, 65-year-olds, welcome. Eagles fans, welcome.
Yep.
Even lefties, welcome. Right here on the Will Cain Show. All right. I just want to see. You got this one, too.
What?
Dave McCormick. Throw that up. First time watching this show, and I've now set a reminder so I won't forget. That's what I'm always asking.
You could do that
That's
on
great.
YouTube. Set
Thank
a
you,
reminder, notifications.
I guess that's not the Senate Pennsylvania
Correct.
candidate, David McCormick. He's got a Tennessee
It might
logo.
be. He might be at the RNC He might be at the RNC right now watching.
He's in the back
from that basement where we just had Josh Holmes broadcasting to us from. And then Patty Broadway says, great podcast, Will. By the way, love you're from Sherman. That's right. So great to have a homeboy podcast option. It's a standout. Thank you. I'm your homeboy.
Then I found
small town Texas.
I found one.
One more?
Yeah, this person was a Spotify listener. I usually listen on Spotify, but watched on YouTube for the first time. I'm so happy to put faces to the team. Go Texas. It's from Laura Kobe.
Boy.
Yeah.
A girl. Oh, yeah, it's a girl, Laura. That a girl, Laura.
Yep.
Isn't that interesting? Like when you listen to something, I've done that so many times,
it is
and
weird.
then you create a visual image of who these guys are. Like, who were you guys in their minds before they went to YouTube and saw? I mean, somebody did comment one time that I did such a good job painting pictures of you guys. Like, all right, Two-A-Days. Two-A-Days got his nickname. People have asked me this. From his previous job, he looks like a Brooklyn garage band on the weekends bartender at night, garage bands on the weekend, beard, long hair, sleeve tats. That's pretty accurate. Young Establishment James wears vests in the summer. He wears loafers. He's got a vest on today. It's literally 100 degrees in Texas.
It's 95 here, just to confirm.
No,
it's 95 degrees here.
Really?
Yes.
He's got that looks like a fleece vest.
This is
he's wearing.
No, this is in LA.
It's down.
June of
it has down feathers.
This is a June of 2023 U.S. Open vest, so it's meant for June, July type weather.
No, good. So Young Establishment James is showing he's into golf.
Wow.
He's
sue me.
He's got a cherubic face.
He's setting up his dating profile right now
for those hallway conversations. How's the golf game?
Yeah. How you swinging them? That's what he says to Brett Baer in the hallways. And then Tinfoil Pat has unfortunately morphed because the prior description was he had an alt-right haircut, but he's let it go, which is a shame. But he is rocking a 90s goatee. So
it's a move. We need to get you an actual tinfoil hat, though, I think, to put on during like a conspiracy segment.
You can just make one, right?
Yeah. And I got rid of it because I didn't want to, make it a thing. So.
What happened to the alt-right haircut? Why'd you let that go? You're like doing something floppy for the summer. Let's get back to the.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really leave my house to go get haircuts, so I'm kind of at the mercy of like a sister or my wife or whoever wants to cut my hair. So.
We got to get you a more conspiratorial background too. I know if we pan that camera left or right, there's some whiteboards with some things connecting.
Yeah, there's some strings connecting dots and
behind my
thumbtacks.
head is a whiteboard.
Wow.
So it's just propped up there.
Yep, that's what they look like. That is the Willisha. We're glad to have you here as well as part of the Willisha listening to the Will Cain Show on Spotify or Apple. Or Big Numbers. We've been doing Big Numbers on YouTube, so we're glad you're part of the audience. It is a different show. It is an Airhead show, but it is for you if you want to hang out every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll be back again tomorrow, making sense as best we can of the world through the lens of a bunch of Airheads. See you next time on the Will Cain Show.